Hello once again, and thank you for joining me. This is part 9 of the Essentials series, talking about practical tools for effective evangelism, especially here in the Canadian context. We've been having a great time and a great conversation with Pastor Bill Santos. Thank you for joining us again.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, last time we talked about appeals, making appeals effectively. You shared some wonderful insights there from your experience. And now we're going to be taking the next step. So after the appeal, let's say someone came forward or someone marked on their card that they want to be baptized. We're going to dive deeper into a little bit about what that looks like. And so I invite you to, wherever you are, take out a piece of paper, a pen, take down some notes, and we will dive right into our topic for this evening. So when it comes to baptism, one of the first things that I think we need to think about is, when is it appropriate to ask for baptism? Are we talking about every night from night one? Have you ever asked for baptism starting night one? Or do you wait for the baptism message? When do you appeal for a baptism?
So again, I think it depends. So I'm coming as an evangelist working with local church pastor, local church. So I kind of take my cue from them to an extent, because I've seen both extremes. I've seen where I didn't make the appeal for baptism opening night, and the local pastors came to me and said, I thought you were going to make an appeal. And I'm like, well, and I started, and we made appeals for baptism every night from the second night on, and, probably baptized, almost 30% of the audience we had, so.
High.
To the other extreme, where I had a pastor say to me, you're going to make another appeal again, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were really uncomfortable with appeals. So if the folks, I'll take my cue, if the local church, if the individuals are prepared, then if we're going, let me put it this way, if we're going to err, if we're going to make a mistake, let's make the mistake on baptizing too soon and too many times rather than waiting. Okay. If we're going to err, let's err on that side, right? I think baptisms generate baptisms. Mm-hmm. I think when folks see the baptism, there's a power in that, that whole personal experience of that individual going into that water. I think it's very, very impactful. I think the Holy Spirit, the work of the Holy Spirit is more pronounced in those moments, and I think it creates for some folks that are there the sort of the vision of what, of where they want to go, where they need to go. So if you have to start if you have candidates, start baptizing them.
Really?
Yeah.
Before you even get to the baptism, you would do a baptism. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I've done that before, and it's worked. You can give a brief explanation of what's happening here, and then let folks know that we are going to have one night where we're going to talk exactly about what why be baptized and what that actually means. But if you had I'm reluctant to delay folks that want to get ready, that are ready for baptism, But baptizing before I've done the baptismal message is probably more of an anomaly than, generally speaking, the baptisms will happen sort of later on in the series, usually in those last, the last few nights, and then culminating with, the final night is to have the big, but again, if you had folks that were ready before that, Pastor Henry Fireman was a real proponent of baptizing, baptisms generate baptisms. And so he would actually encourage baptisms early, early on. Yeah, I haven't seen it being a negative.
No, what I've found is that if you do it before the night that you talk about baptism, when it comes time to the night of baptism, it takes almost the sense of fear out of it?
Yeah.
Because when you talk about baptism,
Yeah.
they're thinking in their head, right? Someone
right.
who's never seen it before. What do you mean? Like, I have to get in water? What does that mean? What do I wear?
Yes.
How does that whole thing work?
Yes.
You're dunking me? For how long? Do I
That's
have
right.
to hold my breath? All these questions come
That's
up.
right.
But if they see it, oh, it's a beautiful,
Yes.
ceremony, and it's a
Exactly.
beautiful, the decision, and it's emotional. You feel like, okay, this isn't so bad.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
right.
not a bad thing at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it can work, very positively. I think so. I think that it gives folks a very clear picture of what that's all about. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, so let's back up. Before the actual baptism happens, and between the appeal and the baptism, you have this process of clearing. And so let me ask you a couple of questions here. Like, when it comes to clearing, do you usually do that, or do you let the local pastor do it, or an elder do it? Do you get someone of the same gender to do it? How do you go through the clearing process? I know there's like the 13 baptismal vows, but there's also the 3. What has been your experience and best practices in clearing?
My favorite answer is depends, right?
It depends. Sure,
But,
of course.
So as much as is possible around any decisions with baptism, I like to defer that to the local pastor. I like to have the local, because I'm coming in as an evangelist from outside. So I like the local pastor to be in the baptistry and really to have that experience with that congregant. That's going to be part of their flock, right? So as far as clearing is concerned, there's a couple of ways we've done it. And sometimes it depends on the number of individuals we have that are requesting baptism. But the first thing I'd say is I'd like to clear. I recommend clearing progressively. So as we present some of these truths, that's where the decision card can come in really. And we talked in a previous program about having a tracking system. That's where that really becomes useful, because I can see that on the night that we had a card that said, I want to be ready for the second coming, Rob answered favorably. On the night that we presented the Sabbath, for example, Rob said, yes, I believe that the Bible Sabbath is Saturday. So that being the case, when you've gotten to the point of accepting the Sabbath, I could probably start clearing you. I can clear as far as the Sabbath.
Okay.
So I'm clearing you
Got it.
in progression, right?
Got it, yeah.
Rather than waiting everything to the very end. So that's one way. If you're doing it that way, that's typically done in the home or in a small group. It's getting a little bit more uncomfortable to go to individuals' homes, although going into the home is part of the clearing process, because there's living arrangements and things that we might not be privy to until we get to the home. So that like I might go if the local pastor wants me to go with them, right? But I try to defer as much as I can to the local pastor. Sometimes they've never done that before, and so they ask me to take the lead, and I would do that, and then I would ask them to have a prayer, because I want those individuals connecting with, I don't want folks to think, well, the evangelist comes in here and then he leaves and all their expertise is gone, everything's gone, right? No, we don't want to do that. So you can clear in progression. If it's a small group, you go to the home. But if you're going to go to the home, don't take 5 people with you. Like, don't take a big congregation to some individual's home. Go like 2 people.
Yeah.
If it's obviously if it's someone of the opposite sex, make sure you have somebody accompanying you. So if you're married, take your husband and wife, go together. Failing that, small group, you can do it at the church prior to the session. So if we're starting at 7 o'clock, you can ask them, can you be here at 6 o'clock, right? And you do it in the church setting. What I've also done in situations where we had maybe a larger group, multiple folks, is on the night that we were off, we do a baptismal class. And we would open that to anyone. So we'll say, listen, we don't have a program scheduled Thursday night, But some of us are going to get together and have a bit of an informal Bible study. In that group are some folks that have identified, that have indicated they'd like to be baptized, but it's open to anybody.
Right.
Anybody can come.
Right.
It's going to be a little informal, and we're basically just going to recap some of the things we've been talking about, over the last, week and a half that we've been here. And so we'll be we're going to be it's going to be very casual, very informal, right? And we'll be here at 7 o'clock regular night. You're welcome to join us, and we do a baptismal class.
Nice.
Right? Where we can clear folks up to that point again. And so then probably do another one before. So, after we've done the state of the dead. So that typically becomes the next sort of, because those are the two.
The testing.
The two testing. And then the state of the dead is probably the most difficult one.
So if someone was joining your series, and there was no pre-work done with this person, let's say you're doing a little bit of a longer one, when you get to the clearing phase, do you want to make sure, like, for instance, you may not cover tithing or something, some subject. Is that the time when you do the clearing, is when you teach them about that?
Yes.
Or how do you deal with some of the truths that maybe you don't have time to cover in depth? In the series?
Yeah, so we would exactly that. We would explain to them, listen, we're here for a limited amount of time.
Right.
What we've got here, we've got your baptismal vows.
Yeah.
These are the things you have to understand. Some of them you're going to see are repetitive. We've talked about, and I'm just going to go over them just as a recap, because some of them are areas that just time constraints we don't have time in the meetings to do. But you know what? I'm going to go over them here now. If you have any questions, where I'm happy, or the pastor here is happy to sit with you and explain. So I'm not going to spend the same amount of time on each one of those 13, baptismal vows, because some of them we've already Christ's atoning, right? The Sabbath, maybe we've covered. And then maybe, spend a little bit more time on the tithing, showing how the church, handles the money, and how that all happens, and how pastors are paid. Because that is that's an issue. Sadly, there's been a lot of negative stuff around, pastors, and not, evangelical pastors, I guess, and others, right? Not being, good stewards of other people's money. And we have a wonderful system. Like, our Adventist system of how we handle that is beautiful. I love telling folks about that, like how we handle, money within our churches. And so, we would do that, and always have some resources available for folks, that we can provide them as as additional material. But
So what about if you're doing a series that's not at the church? Whether by a lake, let's say you do a baptism in a lake. What if you're doing it at a neutral venue, like at a hotel? How do you deal with the baptism itself, but also then the vote to accept them into membership?
Yeah, so part of the clearing, right, is that they have made a commitment to become a member of a local congregation. And so, typically what we would do there is say they're being baptized here now, and then next week or the week after, when the meetings end, right, there's going to be sort of an administrative vote back as you're welcomed into the, and typically that's when the certificate, usually we don't give the certificates at, the evangelistic series, and so they now are integrated into their local congregation. They get their certificates. They're voted in, they're voted into membership, and that's how typically we do it there. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where a church would rather just baptize someone in Jesus rather than, let's have a service. That's okay. We'll baptize them in Jesus, and then later we will put them in a class where they'll learn more of the testing truths, where it's maybe your series is shorter and you're not able to get through all the topics, but they still want to be baptized.
I've never had a church do that. I've had a candidate for baptism on a couple of occasions say to me, I really don't want to be baptized into any, into any church. And I'll explain to them that, I understand that, but you're also not called to be an island. Like, you're religious, like that's not God's, like,
right.
First of all, you're not gifted in every area, because your baptism is almost like an ordination. right? It's a commitment to service now that you're going to serve. Well, how are you going to? You don't have all the gifts.
That's right.
Right? That's why you need to be part of a congregation, because you need complementary gifts, right? To go forward so that becomes a little bit problematic, because I'm, as the minister, I feel like I'm doing you a disservice, because you're not going to be able to fulfill the calling, the commission. That's why we connect you to a church. I had one situation one time in Lancaster where I had a pastor that was reluctant to tell folks, you're going to be joining. And I said to him, there was one particular candidate, and he said, I'm going to be meeting with so-and-so, I'm going to be clearing them. And he says, I'm worried about when it comes to asking about congregation, I'm not sure he's going to win back. I said, what time are you going to have what time are you going to be meeting with him? He said, told me the time. I said, I'll be praying for you at that time. And I prayed, and that evening, as soon as I saw the pastor walk into the venue, he had this smile like ear to ear, right? And I said, how did it go? He goes, oh man, he says, when I got to the 13th statement where it says, I want to become a member of this local congregation of the worldwide church. He says, the candidate goes, of course I want to become a member of the local church, right? I can't do this on my own. Of course, where else am I going to go, right? He's going, man, I never expected that reaction, right? And I go, that's that's how it is. And so, hey, listen, let's baptize. Don't be afraid to call people to a decision. Again, this may sound controversial, Rob, but I mean, I'm being as honest.
Sure. Please.
There's been times where, should we baptize? If we're going to make a mistake, let's err on the side of baptizing. And for me as a minister, my conscience is much like I feel like if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake on the side of baptism. Wow. So someone says, I want to make a decision for baptism. I want to be baptized. And there may be some folks that are saying, well, I don't think they're ready. That's a struggle. If I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake by baptizing them.
Wow.
And if they weren't ready at that time, they can always be rebaptized at a later time. You know what I mean? But I sleep much better knowing that than rather than saying to them, I'm not going to, I'm not going to honor that decision because for whatever reason, I don't think you're,
I love that. I think we kind of have to be careful of the two extremes. One is saying, and I've been around both where, you don't share anything about Ellen White or tithing or anything because you're afraid of stepping on toes, and then they become baptized and they have no idea. They find out about Ellen White later on and they're like, who's Ellen? And then you have the other extreme where it almost feels like, and I know this is probably not intentional, but it almost feels like you need a PhD in order to be baptized.
That's right.
And so it's a fine balance, I think, in the middle. And I think we need I know we need the Holy Spirit to be with us when we go through that. But I appreciate how you emphasized, and I agree with you. If I have to err, I would rather err on the side of baptism than saying, no, I'm sorry, because then they leave feeling like I wasn't good enough. Yeah. And obviously it needs some care and some, it's a delicate topic.
It is a delicate. And the other one sometimes is age. I know we've gone beyond our time, but age. Are they too young to be baptized? Again, I think folks, and that could depend. You're going to have some 9-year-olds that have a really firm grasp. Yes, exactly. You have some 40-year-olds that don't, right? Yep. And so I don't remember who said this to me, but someone, it might have been Ishmael Ali, Pastor Ishmael. He said, it's funny because the devil will take him at any age.
Wow.
Right? Wow. So again, it's not. I have to feel comfortable that young person, if it's a young person, understands the decision that they're making.
Yes.
Right? But I've had 9-year-olds that I've sat and cleared for baptism and went, wow, that is amazing what this young person knows. Again, as a minister, as a shepherd of the flock, I can't. Obviously, I have to get the okay with the parents. Like the parents have to agree, right?
Yes. Okay.
get the parents' authorization. But if the parents are on board, and I feel that that 9-year-old sometimes, or a 10-year-old has grasped with the commitment that they're making, I'll baptize them.
Wow.
And because, as Ishmael said,
Yeah.
the devil will take him at any age.
He'll take him. He'll take him.
So,
Thank you so much, Bill. Powerful
praise
stuff.
God.
Thank you so much for joining us on this this episode of Essentials, where we're talking about evangelism best practices in Canada. Today, we talked all about baptism. Next time, for our final session, we're going to be talking about what happens after the baptism. How do we engage newly baptized members? I hope you enjoyed this session, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.